Welcome to Movies Are Life. I'm your host, Nathan Chandler. The Byrds famously sung, and I promise I'm not going to sing these lyrics. Nobody wants to hear that. But to everything, to everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season. Turn, turn, turn. And I think those lyrics perfectly sum up today's movie, 500 Days of Summer, which lies at number 50 on the 50 best rom-coms list. So bottom of the list, so to speak, but I'm welcoming in frequent guest Charles Mills to today's podcast. How are you doing? You still getting over that breakup?
Yeah, that's right. Our breakup.
So before we really dive into what you think about this film, just a little bit of background in case somebody's never seen it. But 500 Days of Summer is a 2009 American romantic comedy / drama directed by Mark Webb, who, after this movie, rebooted the Spider-Man franchise, The Amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield. Before this film, he was a director of numerous music videos, which I think completely makes sense once you watch this movie. The film stars Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Zooey Deschanel and employs a non-linear narrative structure with a story based upon its male protagonist and his memories of a failed relationship. As an independent production, the film was picked up for distribution by Fox Searchlight Pictures and premiered at the 25th Sundance Film Festival. It received positive critical reviews and became a successful sleeper hit, earning over $60 million in worldwide returns for exceeding its $7.5 million budget. Many critics lauded the film as one of the best from 2009 and drew comparisons to other acclaimed films such as Annie Hall and High Fidelity. So, Charles, what made you pick this film as the one that you wanted to talk about on this list?
I really like this movie. I hadn't seen it since it came out in theaters, so I rewatched it for the first time, and it held up really well for me. I think it's the trailer and it's the narrator thing in the trailer, where he's like, "You should know up front, this is not a love story." That line just always got me. I'm like, okay, this is gonna be something different.
Right.
And I appreciated that. It reminded me, it's not nearly as good a movie, but it reminds me a lot of The Breakup.
Yeah. I saw The Breakup. I don't really it's been a while, so I don't quite remember it. I know a lot of people were quite not satisfied with the ending of The Breakup, and I actually remember kind of liking it.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly, because it doesn't go with the super happy ending, and
Right.
neither does this.
No, yeah. And even when watching it, Whitney was kind of in and out of a little bit, and she was like, "Is this a romantic comedy?" And I do think it can still fall into that category. But how do you feel? It may lie more on that drama side of things, but
Oh yeah, I think it's a mixture. I think it's a sweet mixture of the two. It's and it, if man, I'm saying mixture. It's probably is more drama, but it has the comedy element in there, and it is romantic. It's just I love the idea that it's two opposed people, completely opposed, and one is hurt, and that's her reason for doing things, and the other is an optimist. They both had divorced parents, and they both came to their own conclusions about what that meant and all that. And I always love that. Because they're both at fault, and they're both not at fault for the relationship and the way it had. It just because you could argue that she told him no, and he accepted that, and then she kissed him and kind of let it on. But you could also argue that he ignored all the signs too. So there's a mixture there. They both did things that pushed it further than it perhaps should have gone.
right, yeah.
And I like that. It felt realistic that way.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's probably been around when the movie came out since I've seen it, and I can't remember if I saw it in the theater. I kind of feel like it did, and it was probably one of the first Blu-rays that I bought also, and so just because I was that drawn to it, and watching it now, I can kind of see how some of the cuteness, so to speak, of it, it's unique in its editing style and kind of its kitschiness, so to speak. But I can understand why somebody may think it's a little too cute. But personally, I just really love this movie because for several reasons. But I think it perfectly encapsulates how a 20-something feels about love, thinks about love, especially, being single and kind of being out there. And I just can easily reflect back to that time. And so much of what I thought was maybe finding the right one was if that person had exact taste in music as I did. Or, and like you said, he kind of had this list in his head that like filled in the check marks, so to speak. And Summers is doing that, but she's not completely on the same wavelength. So I think just the way, especially a young professional who might be single, you have your work and then you probably are focused on romance. And I just think at the time, I probably could relate a lot more because I was in my 20s when I first saw it. Seeing it now as a 40-year-old, it kind of brought me back to that time and how I kind of felt about things. So that's how I felt like it completely held up. So I don't know if you connect to that at all.
Yeah, I do. And you mentioned the editing. We gotta talk about that for just a second. But the editing is fantastic. Like this is one of the most creatively edited films, and specifically, it's a sequence where it does a split screen of expectations and reality.
Yes.
That scene killed me in the theater when I saw it, and it still killed me now because it is like it's so accurate. I mean, and it's not even that he was going to a party just to randomly hook up with someone. He went to a party for that one girl, and he's hoping she would just kind of fall madly in love with him again and leave with him. And that's I have felt that before. Like it's like, is it going to happen? You've worked it up in your head so much, and that just kills me. That absolutely depresses me. But it's so well done. It's such an innovative technique, and I really 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 appreciated that. And but yeah, I am more like his character. I'm kind of an optimist, a romantic when it comes to relationships and love and fate and signs and all that stuff. And I still am. I haven't really grown out of it. That's just the way I am. And so I still relate to, it's funny because the years I still relate to him much more, but now I really do see like her side of things. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
she, at the end, the heartbreaking line I used to be kind of mad about. She's like, what did she say about it? It's the thing I was never sure about with you.
Right.
And it's like, that used to make me kind of mad. I'm like, well, what? But then now I'm like, well, if she wasn't sure, she didn't have, it's not like, she should follow her heart too. But now I see that he actually did change her life, and he probably opened her up to loving people. He was, they said he's the first one that was able to be in her room and break down that wall. So, in a sense, he did change her life, and he probably helped the next guy able to break down further walls and really kind of change her. And he, as the ending implied with Autumn, that he really stayed the same. So, you know, so he's
Yeah.
not
And
hurt in the long run for it, and she's definitely not hurt in the long run. So
yeah, yeah, and if anything, almost kind of likewise, how the relationship helped Summer break down those relationship walls, so to speak. She really helped him pursue this dream of really going, the architecture route and open
yeah,
that
that's true.
up.
That is
Yeah,
true.
and I think there's another reason I connect to this, and I think I made reference to it before, but I made a short film called Lovesick, which was pretty much inspired by a breakup. Me and my friend Courtney, she kind of did the female side. I kind of did the male side of things. Now, when I say this, I'm not comparing this movie to the movie I did, because this is obviously leaps and bounds way better than what I was able to produce in college. But
Let the people decide that. Let the people decide.
but we did very similar things as far as kind of the fantasy type of elements, like the sequence. Like we didn't quite have like Han Solo looking back at him in a reflection, but
Oh, I love that
like,
part. I love
yeah,
that
yeah,
part.
yeah. But we really played with those. I mean, we didn't have anything quite as stellar as the expectations and reality scene you were talking about, but we played with these kind of, oh, this is what's going to happen. And so I connect to it in that level. But the whole point of our movie as well was like these relationships didn't work, but it breaks, it furthers you in life as far as like what you really want to pursue. And that might not be another person, that might actually be your own desires in life. It's cliche to say, but it's better to work on yourself before you actually get into a relationship with somebody.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but I don't know if it's cliche in the movies. I mean, in the movies, it's always exactly what he says in the movie at the end when he quits his job, that it's all lies, like that. We become kind of wide-eyed and uh, and just looking at all these relationships and how they work out. Because in a typical Hollywood movie, they would kind of meet in the middle, understand each other, and still be together at the end. And
Mhm.
that's kind of, it perpetuates a lie. That's not always going to be the case. It's like Sleepless in Seattle, where it's fate, they end up together at the end. That's not always going to be the case. And that's what I really like about this movie. I also I The music is fantastic. I
Mhm.
still love it. I know it's kind of the indie, I don't know, hipster kind of vibe thing, but I really really like it, and the music and the editing really creates a an emotional response more than the actual story does. Like, it all just kind of really goes together to hit you hard.
Oh yeah, for
So
sure. I think it, and I kind of mentioned because we had a lost connection. You might not have heard this setup, but I talked a little bit about Mark Webb, the director. He has a huge music video background, and you can definitely see this in this movie. It's almost like little music videos throughout this whole narrative, but also with the use of music. I think they're really in tune with like what songs go with
right,
certain scenes.
right, it's fantastic. It is, and I also like the little like visual things, like I feel like one of them was when he was walking away down the street, and it kind of became the drawn cartoon thing. Like,
Hmm.
that was an album cover, right? Is that a Bob Dylan album cover? I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think it is. Like, I think there's small stuff that throughout. I may be completely wrong on that. Have you ever seen Vanilla Sky, the Tom Cruise movie?
It's been probably since the theater. It's been
They do
forever.
that. They do that in that movie, like, because he's kind of living a fantasy type thing, and in that movie, so many of the shots represent all these things that he loves. So they do a cover of an album he loves. They do movie shots. So I some on some level, I think those movies are kind of on the same wavelength anyway. But yeah, no, I think this movie's great. There's not really anything that I fault about this movie. It flows really well. I I like the sister that knows. That's kind of an interesting perspective. This is the younger sister that knows way much more than he does. I thought that was a nice touch. Um, and this is probably Joseph Gordon-Levitt's best movie, I think. I mean, he's done. Well, I like 50-50 though a lot too. I think that was another really good one, but
Yeah.
I think
Once
it's my
again,
favorite though.
you keep bringing up movies that I have seen, but probably not since when they first came out. So I'm not like quite in touch with them. But I've always been a really big fan of his. I like this stuff that he creates. Um, and he's always you're probably right as far as this being a standout. But he's done a lot of the Christopher Nolan flicks.
Yeah,
He's in Inception, and he's in one of the Batman movies too, right?
yeah. The last one, he's Robin, which I
Oh
didn't.
yeah.
I, I didn't love the last Batman movie, but that's not really his fault. I don't know how you felt about it.
Yeah, I didn't really watch Third Rock from the Sun very much. So that just I just
Oh, that
skipped
was
that.
really. I like that show a lot.
Yeah,
That's a
but
great show.
um,
And have you seen Looper,
oh, great movie.
where
I really
he
like that
played
movie.
young Bruce Willis? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. That I really like that movie. I'm a big fan of Ryan Johnson.
I like his stuff too, other than Last Jedi.
Oh, you're one of those.
I'm one of those. I hate the Last Jedi. Last Jedi may be my least favorite Star Wars film by far.
Well, I don't want to. That could be probably its own separate podcast. But
But I want to just make it clear. I like Ryan Johnson a lot. I've loved a lot of his movies. Glass
yeah,
Onion was good.
yeah. Have you checked out Poker Face yet?
Not yet. I've been meaning to, because it's gotten really good reviews. So
Yeah, I watched the pilot. I liked it. I don't know. I'm trying to decide whether I should keep going with it, if that makes sense. So,
well, yeah, because there's so many shows out there now. I
yeah,
think
no.
television shows are better than movies at this point. They have like, I don't know, they have like much bigger budget, so they have it doesn't nothing looks cheesy or cheap. They're attracting the best directors. It's kind of amazing. I think this is kind of the new golden era for television.
Oh yeah, for sure. Did you like Zoe Deschanel in this movie?
I did, and I never watched The New Girl, which is what I guess most people know her from.
Right.
I mostly know her from Elf. I liked her a lot in Elf. So yeah, I liked her character in this. I I again, when I first watched it, I was much more in tune with him and just kind of a how dare she do that kind of thing to him. But again, now I see it, it's kind of a mixture of both sides, and I think she played the performance well because she's really not. I don't know. Again, she doesn't lead him on per se, but she sends mixed signals, and that's kind of their thing. But it's really, she's at the beginning, she said she didn't know what it was. So again, you can't really fault her for that. And and again, she's better off. I think like we said, he helped her change, and as you mentioned, she helped him change professionally and do something that made him a lot happier. So
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think she fits this role perfectly. I appreciate her because she's almost just sh she's seemed very, like, herself, and maybe that could be a little knock on her, like, how much is her character different than New Girl in this movie than Elf or whatever like that, but, yeah, I think she was perfectly cast in this movie, and, we did watch New Girl, and we enjoyed the show a lot, but she is also an actress. I just don't, um she for whatever reason, she's a lot to take in if you watch a lot. Like, I think New Girl, when we watched it, it was on TV, so we watched it on a weekly basis. It would be hard to take in as far as like catching it now on streaming and just watching back to back to back episodes. But that might be the more of the whole vibe of the show, which is a lot of loud personality, a lot of loud personalities. Um, but she, obviously, her band, She and Him, which one of the
yeah,
songs featured on the soundtrack here and stuff like that. So I feel like she's a very much like you either are really into her vibe or you're not at all.
I like her in this. I don't really know much what she's been outside besides New Girl and Elf. Like I don't know other movies of hers really.
Well, she was in The Happening, which I've actually never seen. Did you see that one?
Oh, yeah, she is. But that movie, I don't hate that movie like everyone else does. But I did forget about her in that movie. That's kind of sad. But it's
um,
it's not as bad as everyone makes it out to be.
right,
It's
right,
what
right.
that you know what it's about, right? Like
Yeah, I've heard the premise. So about plants, basically.
yeah, but what I like about that movie is it deals with suicide. Like the plants, they don't really fully say it, but I guess the plants put off this kind of thing, chemical, and it makes you kill yourself.
Oh,
and
okay.
and it's like really violent, horrific ways, and it's so that part's really like freaky. And anyway, I don't know why
Yeah.
people hated it so much. It's not the worst movie ever made for sure.
Yeah, another part what I liked about the movie, specifically on how it plays with the timeline and goes back and forth. They do a good job with the time cards and kind of the season. It's either if things are going bad, it's
Right.
kind of gray, and when it's bright. But
Yeah.
I really like the sense of like you could follow everything that was going on. Which I think is really hard to do when you're jumping back and forth like that,
Right.
and I enjoyed how certain scenes, we see the IKEA scene, where it's really cute, where they really have this, connection around the store, and then like later how things aren't going as well, and playing off the same thing and everything like that. So I really like that movie. Just I'm really impressed with you never get lost. And it seems like there
Right.
could have been a movie where you could get lost in it.
And I remember reading about the editing that there's a lot of like invisible cuts. Like he would, I may be wrong on the exact timeline, but I think this was one of the first movies, mainstream movies besides like Star Wars, to really like play with like taking different takes and putting it together in a seamless thing.
Hmm.
So they did a lot. The director talked about doing a lot of like digital tweaks and all that. And I believe it was edited in Final Cut Pro actually.
Oh,
I'd have to look that up, check. But yeah, the director talked about that because I remember like Star Wars, George Lucas was all about digital editing, especially with like the Phantom Menace and stuff. And he would like take one from this actor and take two from this one, and put them together. And that's what they did for this movie.
Hmm.
And he said there's a bunch of invisible cuts that you'll never see because they're like so seamlessly stitched together
Huh.
in terms of performance, which I think it's cool because it does feel very fine tuned. Um, I mean, and I think that goes along with what you're saying. You don't get lost. It's very 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 specific, and I like that.
Yeah. You mentioned this quote that she had I mean, like you watching again, I kind of forgot that existed, and when she says it, it kind of hit me like a dagger too, where he said, you don't want to be named as anybody's girlfriend and now you're someone's wife. And she said, I just woke up one day and I knew. And he said, knew what I was never sure of with you. I was like, oh man.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
uh, that's a very memorable line. Is there anything? Were there any other lines that stuck out to you at all?
I do like. It's not a quote, but I like the fact that when he's fully into her, he likes likes all the things about her, all the things that are kind of idiosyncrasies and all that. And then when he goes back and he hates them all, and it's basically listing the exact same things, the exact same shots. It's just he hates them now. And so I like that. I appreciate that quote. And I like I like a lot of what the sister says.
Yeah.
It's not important time. Like, he says, they make that joke about PMS. She's like, what? He's like, what do you know about PMS? And he's like, more than you, Tom. Like, I love that line because I like that character of the all. It's kind of like a Yoda character, the all-knowing younger sister kind of thing.
Yeah. Also, I found it pretty funny with when his boss calls him in at the Tom works as
Reads the card.
At this greeting card company. I appreciated the joke because you kind of could see where it was going, because he's so morose. Like he's probably not producing the great work, but roses are red, violets are blue. F you whore. And I like how it just like it wasn't like you knew it'd be dark, but they just like they went all in with it. I think that's a kind of a funny moment.
That's kind of like in The Wedding Singer when Adam Sandler sings his song and it goes hardcore to that.
Yeah. I secretly I would love to work at a greeting card company. I don't know about you.
Really? No. No, it would be I would be depressed about it. I don't know because I don't know.
Oh,
Because that's where he's right about it's all lies.
I've always prided myself on finding the like good greeting card for somebody for a birthday or whatever. Always like a pretty good touch of humor and stuff. So I've always appreciated the creativeness of it, and I felt like I would excel in that environment. So
well, I'm sentimental. Like if I get a card like that, it'd probably make me cry. But I never like quite know how to pick the right one. I'm always like, I don't know. I remember I found a greeting card a long time ago with my friend. We were in high school, and it was like it had a picture of a chicken and a spring on the front, and on the inside it just said "You ain't." And I didn't know what that meant for the longest time. We were like, "That's the weirdest card I've ever seen," but it's basically saying you're not a spring chicken. You're old. I had no idea. It was like, what is that? It was like, "You ain't. Happy birthday."
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorite cards.
That's hilarious. I don't know why that made me laugh so much.
It made me laugh. We were in the store. We're like, what is this? Like, what does this card mean? I guess I'd never heard the term spring chicken before that. But anyway.
I remember I got a card. It was early on when Whitney and I were dating for her for her mom. And I don't know why. It just, and I won't repeat what the joke was. Initially, it's just funny, but then it basically has like a sexual context to it behind it. Just kind of, it was a dirty card, and for whatever reason, when I first bought it, that aspect of it didn't hit me, and so I remember showing it to her, and she was like, "There's no way you're giving this to my mom." So anyway, so nice. I have memories of that, but so thankfully, Wendy helped me dodge that bullet.
Well, that was another card. I was helping my friend pick out, same friend with the spring chicken card, but there was a card that said a penny for your thoughts, and on the inside it said like $1 for your panties. And I always said that. So I told him, I was like, you need to put $1 and a penny in there, like just anyway,
yeah. But yeah, I think this movie was one of those things that I was like, oh, I've never thought about that there would actually be a company that made, I mean, yeah, it makes sense. You go greeting card. I
Yeah.
don't think you ever think about the people that make those. So, we talked about some memorable scenes that are I think I'll kind of jump the gun here. Like my favorite, you already mentioned, is the expectations reality scene.
Hmm.
I think that's masterful, and I've always had this. Whether not even necessarily that, but like if you've ever had like a job interview that you're, or even at like some kind of conflict you have to have with somebody, you always play those scenarios out. And I kind of have this motto in my life. I try not to go too deep into that of the expectation side, because almost always it never turns out that the way I think it'll go, whether
Right.
positive or negative, and so I really dig that scene a lot. I also had the Hall and Oates musical number scene. I
Yes.
just love that.
I love that scene. I remember in theaters when Han Solo winked at him. I was like, oh my god. But again, that's one of those things that catches the emotion of that, and it's not. I mean, it's not really just related to the sex part of it, but it is that emotion. Like he felt like he's on top of the world now, and 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 just the dancing, the outright dancing, everything makes me so happy. People high fiving down the street.
Yeah,
It just yeah. So, but
yeah,
the Han Solo thing is what
and
sold it for me.
and I'm not saying this is everybody, but I think I definitely relate to Tom in that, especially as a 20 something. I just always wrapped around I use pop culture to kind of wrap context into things in life. So I can completely relate to, playing a certain song in your head, or seeing these scenarios and stuff. So a lot of times before you get into, I would say, the life type of things like family or just schedules and all that kind of stuff, you put those kind of things, you put those as how you relate to everything. So I think that scene really plays off of that a whole lot.
Yeah, and again, it's not just the second part; it's the fact that he's succeeded. In his mind, he's been able to break down the wall a little bit more.
Was there any other scenes that stood out to you?
Well, I actually I like the ending scene. I kind of mentioned it when he quits, because usually those could be like so over the top dramatic or something. But I actually liked his speech in it, and the whole thing felt realistic too. Um, and it wasn't like an evil boss or something. They didn't make it like stereotypically dramatic. Like the boss actually really seemed to care about him,
Mm-hmm.
and so I appreciated the realism in that scene, and him kind of the explosion finally, all this depression, all this is finally coming out of him. I also really liked the scene on the train. It's like he doesn't want to talk to her. He wants to just ignore her, and it's like she comes up to him and it just rekindles all that for him again.
Mm-hmm.
That gets me. And it
Oh
shows how
yeah.
they're connecting again.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I'm glad you mentioned that one. I had kind of forgotten about that. Yeah, and the scene where he quits. I appreciated his friend who kind of does a slow
The
clap for
slow
him,
clap. Yeah, I like that.
and realizes that, oh yeah, nobody else is really
Well, and
nodding.
I like I like the supporting cast was great because they weren't too like over the top ridiculous. They were actually looking out for their friend. Um,
Mhm.
because he's like, no, you don't get it. Everyone's going. He's trying to, get him to go without being too over the top. I like that. And then you have the other friend that's been married for a while, and it's just I don't know. I think they felt like real friends, like long-term relationships, and they felt like they were again goes back to them caring for him, just like I felt like the boss cared for him. He has all these like people in his circle that really do care for him.
Movie musings.
In this movie, Summer is very vocal with her love for Ringo Starr. So I wanted to ask you who your favorite Beatle was.
Paul McCartney, but I've never gotten the hate for Ringo. Actually, I think he's one of the best drummers, and I actually just learned something about him that he's left-handed, and so but he plays the drums right-handed. But it's like he does this weird. So basically, it changes the rhythm of his songs. He's a very unique rhythm because he's like switching dominant hands,
Huh.
and it gives a very like unique style that's kind of hard to play. Um,
Right.
and so I think he's one of the best drummers. But yeah, Paul McCartney by far. Paul McCartney is the reason I started playing bass. I love Paul McCartney. Um, yeah, I think he's just brilliant. So.
I don't. I've always really enjoyed the Beatles. I can't say I've ever loved them to enough to really have a hard opinion about like which Beatle is the best. But I think it's definitely that you don't think about Ringo as much. But I will say I watched Get Back, the Peter Jackson documentary, and watching that, man, my appreciation for Ringo Starr just like escalated. Like in that movie, he is always the first one there. He is just like
Right,
he is like this. You see that maybe he was quite the constant in that group. Like he,
right.
and so and also being talented as well. But I think maybe when this movie came out, that was maybe a controversial opinion, but I think especially after this documentary, a lot of respect was thrown the Star's way after watching Get Back.
Right. Well, and it, and he and George Harrison were probably overshadowed by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. That's the dynamic of that group, So that it's and Paul McCartney is definitely the more mainstream one and more accessible with the love songs and all that. So it's hard to say, but yeah, the dynamic was just too big for that group.
for for sure. So in this, Tom has a favorite spot that he has that he sits and sketches. I was just wondering, do you have a favorite spot or location that you go to think, meditate?
Sort of. I actually have a hard time like meditating and zoning out. Believe it or not, like, I can never shut off my mind. Um, this one may sound weird, but going to the movies. And it's
Hmm.
not even like necessarily a particular theater, but just being in the movies in the dark. Like that's the time I can like I fully focus on the screen, the movie going on, and I can like zone out. And then even if I've been in like something terrible happened to me that day, I go to a movie and I come out feeling better. So I don't know if that's exactly, but that's my closest I have really.
I enjoy running a lot, and even though I'm running, I'm usually listening to a podcast or something, so I'm not completely clearing my mind. But that's kind of my zen-like spot where I can kind of get away. And I, in particular, we don't live too far from OU's campus, and if I can, I love running on the campus, especially like on a game day before everybody's there. There's something about running in such a known and public place, but when it's empty and it's quiet, I can really tap into that. But
I tried recently. Have you seen those like pods? Those like water what do they call them? It's
Oh, like
it's
a chamber?
Yeah, what do they call it though? It's chamber. You go into it and it's like room temperature water, slightly heated. They close it out. There's no lights. You're just in the dark. It's a deprivation chamber. Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and you go in and I could not relax. Like, so you have to book it for like the hour. And when I went to, and I'm sitting there floating, and I was getting stressed out. It was making me like freak out. So like I didn't want to embarrass myself because I was like the only person there at the time, and like so I got out of it. They have a little shower there. I just kind of sat there outside of it waiting for the hour to be up. That's how much I can't get out of my head. It
Uh,
was that's yeah because it's echoey once you get inside it, and it's salt water. They put a lot of salt in there. Let's not salt. Well, I don't even know, but they put a lot of stuff in it, and so like I had a cut on my hand. I remember it kept burning when I'd get it in the water. I was just miserable. I was like, this is terrible. And it was not relaxing. I was not having a spiritual moment or anything. It's just misery. So yeah, I got out, took a shower, and I'm just sitting there like looking at my phone.
I'm not saying that those things don't exist anymore, but I have a feeling that a lot of people probably have the same experience as you because it's something you definitely don't hear about as much anymore.
I had heard about them a little bit, but yeah, they opened one in Fort Worth near me, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to try that out. It was weird. It was weird. And
Yeah,
I know most people would have probably just walked out, like they would. But I was like, I feel embarrassed that this is how I did it. I
no,
can't even say, I don't like taking baths either. Like I'm not a bath person. I'm a shower person. I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
like being in my own water, like especially in the dark. Like and then I've watched too many horror films. You never know what's going to come at you.
I
So I got
know,
a
I know.
burning hand. Don't want to be enclosed. It's the worst. It's the
Uh,
worst.
yeah, yeah. That's never appealed to me at all. Um, in this movie, they go to a bar and for a karaoke night, it kind of plays out in some different scenes. I was wondering, what's your favorite karaoke song?
Uh well, Don't Stop Believing is always a good one, but
Oh,
that's
that is
kind
a
of
good
become a
one.
stereotype. I actually, to take it back to the Beatles, I like the song Revolution. I love that one with I feel like I'm pretty good at that one. My sister and I, we used to, there's PlayStation games like for singing games. I can't remember what they're called, SingStar and other things.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we just,
karaoke
we used
star or
to,
something.
yeah, we just used to do that. We would, my sister and I would just compete like hardcore just against each other. It's kind of fun. You know what? Another one I like too. This is, um, uh, well, it's the I don't know what it's called. It's oh God, what's his name? The Country Stars. It's Neon Light. Uh,
Oh, Brooks and Dunn.
Brooks it on. Yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah.
Neon
What's the note
Moon.
to?
They sing that.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Neon Moon. That's what it
Okay.
is. Yeah, my friends took me to a country bar. Oh God, it was bad, and that was one of the songs playing there. But this is kind of a weird thing, but they I didn't want to go. They take me there, and then there's like this old woman who's got to be in her 70s, maybe 80s, and she's got on like leather chaps and like this, and and she's just like constantly like hitting on me during the whole thing, like just uncomfortably, like. And my friends thought it was hilarious, so they're just like leaving me alone. I'm like, please God, get me out of this place. Anyway, so the Neon Moon just reminded me that's the memory.
Now every time I hear that song, I picture you and a dear
Yeah,
old
this would be
woman
when I was
slow
very
dancing.
young. This was like early 20s, and I couldn't get. But like she was like with chaps, like leather chaps with like a thong. Like it was very uncomfortable. He's trying to give me a lap dance, and I was like, I just want out of here, please God.
What was the name of that country bar again? I just
I
want.
don't know. I don't know. It's somewhere at Fort Worth. This is in the middle of like nowhere, Fort Worth. So it
That
wasn't
this
like a strip club or anything. It was like a country western bar. Like they were doing line dancing and all that, and it's just weird. Because I didn't want to be mean, so I was just like, please God, please God.
well, I don't quite know how to transition out of that, but well,
Sorry, you can cut that one out if you want to. That may be
no,
too much.
I think it's hilarious.
Rom-com rankings.
I do feel like this could be considered a romantic comedy, even though they don't necessarily end up together. But the first category I have is the romantic chemistry between the leads. So between Tom and Summer, what would you give it?
I give it a 5. I thought their chemistry was great. They were fantastic. Because again, that moment where his friend is like, he likes you, and she's like, is that true? That was like, I was like, oh, that's great. Like he's. So anyway, so yeah, I thought they were a lot of chemistry.
Nice. Yeah, I'm glad you felt that. I gave it 4.5 solely because the half they didn't end up together. But as far as like, especially the scene we just talked about karaoke, but that one, they hang out together that one work night, and after his buddy's been put in the cab and sent off, that scene where that plays out between them and kind of the quiet moments, and that's a time where Mark Webb just lets the camera linger. I mean, you just feel it between those
Right.
those two actors, and yeah, I think it's great. So I would give it 5, except they do,
But
and
it's like the breakup movie we were talking about where they did end up together. I would not give that a 4.5 because I did not feel, even though they dated in real life, Vince Vaughn and Jennifer Aniston, I did not feel like had chemistry.
right.
So I don't know what I would give that one, but anyway.
Does Vince Vaughn have chemistry with anybody, really?
Owen Wilson.
Yeah, but he always seems to kind of bully himself into any relationship he is, into a romantic movie. Like it's kind of like we just watched Dodgeball recently for whatever reason, and it's kind of similar to that. He just somehow we're supposed to just believe because he's Vince Vaughn that this relationship works, but
Well, that's kind of the same thing with like Adam Sandler. Like I never really believe the only person I believe he's had chemistry with is Drew Barrymore.
you hit on a little bit of Tom's best friends in this movie. Mackenzie, played by Jeffrey Arend, I think that's how you say his name, and Paul, played by Matthew Gray Gabler. I recognize him from Criminal Minds, but from 1 to 5, what you seem to be kind of high on them. But what's the rating you give to this best friend aspect in this movie?
5, yeah. I
5?
really,
Wow.
really appreciate. Yeah, I love that aspect. It felt something about it felt real to me. They weren't just like goofy comedic characters. They actually had like personalities, and they were really trying to help their friend out.
Okay, okay. I gave it three. I liked Mackenzie, and he gets a lot more screen time than Paul does. Paul
Yeah,
just kind of awkwardly shows up sometimes, but I think isn't he Paul in Scrubs most of the time? So that kind of makes sense for a doctor, who's just works like really odd hours and stuff. But yeah, I really I liked him. I enjoyed him, but it was probably the one aspect of this movie I didn't remember. Like kind of going in the second time, like I couldn't have told you like who the supporting actors were. I just
I give you that. Yeah, but I still I liked him, and I guess the boss counts in that category a little bit too. I like the boss a lot.
yeah yeah
Agent
yeah yeah
Coulson.
yeah. Agent Coulson. We hit on this earlier. I think we'll probably fall in the same place on this, but the soundtrack for you,
Mhm.
what do you rate it?
5. Yeah, and it's crazy because I don't know a lot of the songs at all. I couldn't tell you what they are, but I give them that because they fit so well with the movie, like extremely well. I was like, man, this is just like it's perfect for the scene, and that can be hard to do, but that gives this movie it felt a lot like Juno. The
Mhm.
soundtrack seemed very similar, so I like that. I like that kind of acoustic, uh, what you want to call it, like heartwarming. I think they're good. Or like acoustic, like indie rock or something. I don't know what you call it.
Yeah, no, I agree. You hit on it earlier too. I think you kind of mentioned it kind of being a little hipsterish, but
Yeah,
I think especially when you have some songs featuring the Smiths, some of the other Simon and Garfunkel's on the soundtrack.
yeah, yeah.
Regina Spektor has a couple of songs on there, but
Oh yeah.
like you,
Well, then the Hall Notes, of course. Yeah,
yeah, but I listened to the soundtrack just on Spotify, and I think all the music is just good on its own. Like if you listen to the soundtrack and stuff, but I also like it because you hit on it perfectly. Now, when I hear some of the songs like on the soundtrack, it connects me to the scenes in the movie. Especially there's a Wolf Mother song when he's kind of when he's like sketching on the chalkboard, kind of going into his like architecture dive, after he's quit his job, and Sweet Disposition. That when I hear that song, I think of this movie. And so that's when I think the soundtrack's Five Hearts. One, I can listen to it on my own, but also it ties into this movie so well. They work off of one another. So yeah, we're definitely in lockstep there. Okay, so the fourth category I have, and this one's probably uh, it's a little hard to categorize, but I have it as the chase scene slash declaration of love. So I don't know. This could go kind of go two different ways. I don't know if it could be them meeting, at his favorite spot again and kind of going through all that. Maybe that's kind of where they're hashing things out. It's not really a declaration of love, but this one was a little hard for me to I don't know if it's that expectations reality scene, if that's kind of the chase scene, but am I the only one who's kind of struggling with this one a little bit?
it's not really. But I would say the part where he gets in a fight at the bar, and then he like leaves, and
Yeah.
he doesn't call her, but she's looking at it, and then she shows up. That's kind of the I would equate that to that kind of scene. It's like, the stupid things happen, they fall apart, but now they're coming back. And that's what always happens in rom-coms. It's like something happens, they fall apart, they don't like each other, and they show back up.
Yeah.
Um, but again, this movie, since they don't end up, they don't end up together. They don't do that. But the closest is that scene where they both clearly want to talk to each other, and she finally shows up. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Oh,
that's
so
probably one of the
how would
moments where she, even though she wasn't 100% sure, she was, that was a moment she was probably pretty sure.
yeah, so what would your rating be for this category?
Oh, it's NA. This is not applicable really, but I
I
guess
know.
I mean
I
it's
know.
hard.
I know.
It's because I'm picturing like, like the scenes in like Love Actually where the little boy's chasing the girl through the airport, or I'm picturing in When Harry Met Sally when Billy Crystal shows up at the New Year's party. It's like those are so great. Or even as I
Mhm.
mentioned, Sleepless in Seattle, or the original one, Love Affair, whatever it's called. It's just there's so many great ones, and so if I can't say NA, I'll say a 1.
Okay.
So
Because I like I guess because this is my podcast, I'm gonna make it NA because I don't want the one star to dip this one
okay,
or one
okay,
heart
okay,
to dip
cool.
this one down.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It just
And
doesn't apply. That's the closest scene.
yeah, yeah. Okay, the last one, rewatchability. What do you give it?
Uh, I would watch it again. So 5. There's I just haven't. It's one of those things I don't really know why I haven't rewatched it since the theater. Although the scenes, like I said, they hit me hard in the theater, so maybe that had something to do with it. But I would definitely watch it again. It held up well.
Yeah, for me,
My wife's never seen it, so I wanted to watch it with her, but the timing didn't work out. But I'd still like her to see it, so I may rewatch it with her.
yeah, like you, I give it 5. I always like coming back to movies that I remember enjoying so much the first time when it's been a while, and just to almost be like, oh yeah, yeah, this is completely. I wasn't I wasn't totally off on my feelings the first go around, and
Right,
so yeah,
right.
like you, I'm glad I saw this again because it'll probably be a movie that's more on my tip of my tongue when I'm recommend. Like, hey, have you? Has it been a while since you've seen 500 Days of Summer? You really should check it out.
Well,
So
and I was gonna say too. This is not related at all, but like American Beauty. When I saw that when it first came out, which is '99, and then I rewatched, and I hadn't watched it again, and I rewatched it for the podcast, and I realized like how time changes you. And I don't want to say matures because that doesn't necessarily sound right, but in that movie, the first time I watched it, I was in high school, and I related to the high school characters in the movie, and I thought the parents were weird. I just couldn't get into it. It didn't make sense to me, and I always said I didn't really like the movie. I already watch it now, and the main guy's like, I think he's 42, is what he says, or something, or he's close to that age. So I'm much closer to his age now, and it's like, oh, now the teenagers seem weird to me, and I'm like, what the heck, like, and I don't know what happened in the meantime, the meanwhile, but uh, this movie was not like that actually. Like I didn't, even though it's been over a decade since I'd seen it, I I could appreciate her character more. That's the main difference, but I still feel like it held up. I didn't feel like there were any characters that I only appreciated because I was young and immature and silly. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, yeah, even though I can maybe see a little argument that this isn't a rom-com because the two main characters don't end up together, but I think quite the opposite. It's still very open with the notion of romance. It's not a cynical movie. So even though these characters don't end up together, that doesn't mean that love doesn't exist. And so,
Right, they
and
go out of their way. They go out of their way to show that it didn't die for him. So
right,
it's still romantic.
and we didn't really touch on this too much, and we don't have to dive into it. But it's also a very funny movie. I laughed
It
a
is.
lot. Yeah, so we, I think the deepness of it kind of makes you overlook some of the pure funny moments in this film. But yeah, I'm definitely glad it's on this list, and it'll be interesting to see kind of where it ranks with everything. But for me personally, just as a movie as itself, I hold it up really high, but I think it's a great romantic comedy.
Recommendations.
Is there one thing that you're watching, reading, listening to that you are recommending to people right now?
I'm really into the Last of Us TV show. I
Yeah.
We love that show. And I played the game, but I never beat it. I'm terrible about beating games. So for me, it's like the first few episodes, I was like, okay, this is exactly like the game. And then it got into an episode where I'm like, oh, I haven't got this far. So it's kind of cool because I'm like, okay, I can see a lot of detail, a lot of appreciation. And then, but yeah, no, I really recommend that one. And Severance is really good on Apple TV.
Yeah.
That was a really cool mystery one. In terms of like movies, I don't know. Like, I guess we'll be talking right now. I've been kind of, watching a ton of Oscar movies, and some of those are hard to take in, especially on your first viewing. So it's like hard for me to even recommend a normal movie that I saw recently. My wife always knows when it's an Oscar movie. Like I'll put it on without saying anything, and she'll be like, "This is an Oscar-nominated film, isn't it?" I'm like, how did you know? She's like, "Well, I know the season, but also they're always like super sad and depressing and weird and." So,
Well,
Anyway,
speaking of, that's my recommendation is Tar by Todd Field. I still, it's a movie that I enjoyed in the moment of seeing. Honestly, right when it was over, I kind of was like, man, it's got a lot of high praise for the type of movie it was. But then it's a movie that really, when you think about it and kind of marinate on the themes that it explores, it kind of hits a little deeper, and it definitely seems like a film that is worth watching a second time, because I think that there's maybe a lot of things working that you're not quite aware of in the moment of watching it. But I think it's a what I liked about it, I think it's a film that like provokes discussion, even though I don't think it's the best film ever made, if that makes sense. But I think if you're willing to dive into the madness of Kate Blanchett, it's a movie worth checking out. Well, next week we're going to go further down the list and cover number 15, which is Hitch, starring Will Smith.
oh god,
We were actually talking about Will Smith before we started recording here.
oh
So
god,
it's
I'm sorry, I don't mean to ruin your outro here, but dang, I had a reaction to that. Okay.
uh, and I won't lie, regardless of how you feel about everything that went down with the slap at the Oscars, uh, sadly, I think that's going to be a lasting image of Will Smith that kind of popped up as I was watching the film. He couldn't help but think about it. But it'll be interesting to dive into that movie and try to overlook, world versus fictional world. So
I don't like that movie just because it's not the slap that has anything to do with me not liking that movie. I didn't like the movie when I saw it in theaters. It was terrible. So anyway, sorry. Go ahead. Continue. Just wanted to clarify that.
no, it's good. No, it's good. So Charles, I know we've talked about it before when you've been on guest on the podcast, but tell us all about the great things that you're doing in your world.
My podcast is it's been kind of on a little bit of a hiatus, not too much though, but that's because one of my co-hosts, Kelly, she had her second kid. She had a boy, and so what we weren't really sure what to do in the meantime, but we've decided to do episodes that she would never want to be a part of. So some of the more extreme ones and all that. And in fact, we'll probably be doing trauma movies soon. If you know trauma,
I
I
don't.
actually well, so okay, well, that's the whole thing. Maybe I'll invite you for that episode because it would be nice to get your reaction. But I actually just recently, kind of randomly, I met the creator of Trauma, and so I was really excited about it. Lloyd Kaufman, that was awesome. I won't say anything. These are not your typical movies at all. And so they're movies that Kelly would never want to watch. So yeah, okay. So the title of the podcast, I have 3 different podcasts, but that one is called The Good, the Bad, the Podcast. It's where we any one of the hosts, they pick a genre. So, we might pick like Steven Spielberg movies, and then we would give an example of what we think is his best movie, his worst movie, and then an ugly movie, which is, just a guilty pleasure kind of thing. And that's that podcast and all the other podcasts. You could find them on itsjustawesome.com. And they're also on iTunes as well. That's the main place to check it out.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. And check those websites out. And then also for sure, check out moviesarelife.com for episode reviews and more. And make sure to follow our social media content this week. I've watched a lot of films over February, so I'll be posting a lot about some of the reviews of some of the movies I've been able to catch up on. And I'll definitely be watching the Oscars come Sunday, so probably be posting about that as well. So Charles, as always, thanks for coming on and talking about this movie. It was fun to revisit
this
this
was awesome.
one.
I really enjoyed this. I want to do more of these. So anytime you have a need for another guest, call me up.
Okay, I will for sure. So, all right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.